Voices of Pensacola is a multicultural center. But we work with Gulf Power to do the old Beacon building. If you were familiar with downtown, ever went to a dance years ago, down at what was the City Hall Annex, when the old Wentworth Museum was City Hall. It was a building behind it on Church Street, and it was the Beacon Team Club, and they have offices on the second floor. We do exhibits on the first floor. We've got a little theater in there, a little meeting room, and then the second floor is our archives, where we keep the collection. You know, we have a pretty decent archival collection before the Historical Society came in, but when they came in, they started in 1935, they had a huge collection. So those combined collections of photographs, historical journals, family histories, all those were up there. It's quite a good bit of information that is open for research to come down. We research there for our exhibits and telling the history of Pensacola. So quite an amazing collection that's there that the citizens of this area have donated to for years and years. So we operate that archive, not just those museums. And then you think about the other part down in what we call our historic village, down near Seville Square. Old Christ Church is part of that. You probably know that one. But we've got the Museum of Industry, and a lot of people have been to events at the Museum of Commerce, the street scene, big warehouse down there. And then we've got a collection of those historic house museums, least of which is not the Terry Barkley Door House. The Door House was probably the early museums in Pensacola. It's right on Seville Square. And then we've got a couple of Creole cottages. So that's our footprint. We talked about 29 properties downtown. It's about 9 acres. We're pretty major landholders. Now, of those 29, we mentioned, I talked about 12 of those were museums. What are the rest? Well, we also are landlords. We rent some of these properties out. If you've been down, I'm going to get somebody to tell them themselves. If you just have to give me a nod if you don't want to say it. Pensacola Bay Brewery on Seville Square, that building, that's one of our tenants. The Pensacola Symphony, they rent the upper floor of the Tivoli House. They're tenants of ours. The South Market Restaurant, that's down on Main Street, they're tenants of ours. We've got an accounting office. We've got a little wedding dress shop that's in the old Arthur Walton Cottage, and then the little English tea room that's in the Moreno Cottage. So those tenants, we try to bring tenants in and sort of add to the tourism piece. We do have a little saltwater glass etching business. They sell things. It tries to benefit the tourists, but it's also some nonprofits. The African American Heritage Society rent one of our buildings from us, as does the Florida Public Archaeology Network. And I think you guys worked with them a little bit on the exhibits you have over here years ago. So we're landlords. We think we're pretty benevolent landlords. We've got great tenants and they stay with us a long time, and we don't go and bump their rent up forever. But they are in historic buildings, and we stress that with them, and they all want to be there. So that's part of what we do. Some of the other properties we have, we got a pretty good collection. If you knew T.T. Wentworth or anything about that, he had a huge collection. What he gave to the state of Florida is still the largest personal collection as far as number of items that was ever given to the state. We got items from as small as a postage stamp to as large as a trolley car. If you go to the Museum of Commerce, that was in his backyard. It was one of the original trolley cars. Well, we don't have room to put all of it out all the time, and we try to rotate things in and out because you don't need it on display all the time. It's not really good for things to be out getting the sun and getting the light. So we have a couple. We have 4 storage areas that are pretty large. A warehouse over on the street. We've got some other storage areas behind the scenes in the museums. And then part of what we do is also, this brings in some revenue. We use some of these museums, not just as museums, but we rent them out for events. Old Christ Church is one. Museum of Commerce for the parties that you've been to. We've got the Barkley House. I didn't mention that one. That's one of ours. It rents out for special events. You can even, inside the History Museum, we did an exhibit a few years ago. We recreated Trader John's bar. And that's available to rent for small events. Cocktails, you can't do a sit-down dinner in there, but you can do a cocktail for 30, 40 people. And they do that a lot. The Blue Angels reunion groups, when they come in, they book that place and have a party. When you get the whole museum because it's on the second floor and you have to come through. But it's been very popular. We bring in revenue through that. The other benefits that we pour back into our programs, and I'll talk about them in a second. But it also brings in people who maybe are are not traditional museum visitors. They'll come for a party. They might not come and say, oh, I'm going to go see the museum, but they get there and they look around and they learn a little something, and a lot of times they come back. And so that's a way that we can do some outreach while we're bringing in some revenue, but it's also good for tourism here in Pensacola. So those are some of the things that we do with the how do we show these buildings off. And I talked about the special events, but we do daily guided tours of some of our historic houses. Old Christ Church is one of those that's on the guided tour. We've got a couple 1805 Creole cottages, which are the oldest buildings that we have. We do daily historic demonstrations with people dressed in historic costume. Usually it's colonial Pensacola, that's some of the older ones. We've done some Victorian, we've done some military. We've even got the costume to dress somebody up like Tristan DeLuna if we wanted to. They hate wearing that thing because it's got some chainmail and it's pretty heavy. But we do those daily. We recreated a little kitchen house out back. We didn't want them starting fires and doing cooking in the original 1805 cottage because God forbid they burn that thing down. We can't replace it. But back then, a lot of their cooking had been done in an outdoor kitchen. And so we recreated one. And it's been a boon to us to allow us to store things. They grow box gardens. We use a lot of university students that we train and put into costumes under the tutelage of our actual professional living history coordinators. They learn a lot. They get to do public speaking. But we've got several box gardens, and they grow vegetables and herbs that were here in colonial times. And a little friendly competition amongst a number of them. They'll each get a box garden. They'll try to outgrow the others. It's been pretty good. But we use those in the cooking. Now, I can't let the public necessarily eat that because the health department, but sometimes they'll just need a taste, but they usually eat lunch. Our kitchen house and our historic village, this is something that people don't know just yet. 3 weeks ago on that Friday, it was so cold and rainy, and we had a Emmy Award-winning PBS show. 8 Emmys. I didn't know this as I talked to the guy. They won 8 Emmys, but it's a taste of history. And they have a chef who's also very interested in history who travels around the world and goes and talks about the history of a community, but then talks about what they were eating historically. What this chef did, the PBS program, they filmed in our historic village and used our kitchen house to cook over the fire. But they brought in 3 local chefs in Pensacola. Irv Miller from Jackson's, Gus Silvas, who used to do Scopolo's, and now I forget the other restaurant he's got now, and then Blake Rushing that does Union Public House over there. And they did their take on historic recipes using local fare. Most of them involved some seafood. Irv did some oysters and those. And this is going to air on PBS later this year. We're going to send it out in our newsletter on our website when we actually find out it's going to happen. But spent all day filming. My staff trooped through this in this freezing cold weather because every time they started filming, they had to get out of the kitchen house and stand out in the on the eaves of it. But it was a good experience, and we got nothing but rave reviews from the staff and the producers that came down for the location, and how charming Pensacola and the Gulf Coast in general was. So we do those things. Part of this, I was talking about the tours that we do, and people see this on the tours, is we do school tours. Every 4th grade class in Escambia County, and most of Santa Rosa County has come through that historic village and dipped a candle, done a hands-on piece. It's amazing. I used to give school tours back 17 years ago, and I recently hired someone, and they say, you gave me my tour in 4th grade. That makes you feel a little old, doesn't it? So on to some things that, and you kind of guessed we did those things. Other things that we do, we've got this whole collection of historic structures, so we have to be pretty knowledgeable about historic preservation. We follow the Secretary of Interior standards put out for the National Park Service. We have to adhere to, because these are state-owned properties, we have to adhere to the rules and regulations of the Department of State Division of Historical Resources, and their architects. We also have to, because we are located in one of the designated historic districts in Pensacola, we also have to adhere to what the Architectural Review Board does. It's all good stuff. It's what we should be doing, and we should be setting the examples. I do have, and Barbara, I think you've met him, Ross Costera, who is our historic preservationist. I was able to snag him because he was fresh out of college, but I actually have working for me. I feel pretty proud, but University of South Alabama and University of West Alabama. I'm a coastal guy, went to those state colleges. Ross is a Cornell graduate. I'm pretty proud of that. He got his master's from Cornell in historic preservation, and we've been able to bring in Cornell interns every year. Last couple years, we didn't do it because of COVID, in historic preservation to come and work in some of our properties. But we're doing those preservation of properties. And, you know, that in and of itself is something that keeps you busy. Anybody ever had an old house and you're always working on it? Well, that last hurricane we had, Hurricane Sally, really did a number on us. We had about $2.5 million worth of damage to the properties. I don't know if you saw in the news journal on Channel 3 right after it happened. We probably didn't have power to see those, but the Museum of Commerce roof was in the middle of Tarragona Street. It was not a great thing. So he oversaw that and made sure that we went back with them that was historically accurate. So those are some of the things we do. Our buildings that we manage take up, they make up a little over 155,000 square feet of history, of actual. We always view that the structures that we manage are the largest artifacts we have in our collection, because that's what they are. And so we try to take care of them. We follow those standards. Like I said, it's about 9 acres we have down there, and they're all state-owned. Our governance is a little different than most museums, and I speak with my colleagues across the state, and they're kind of scratching their head at how we do this one, because we have dual governance. We're a direct support organization of the University of West Florida. All the staff are UWF employees. We use student interns as employees. We have classrooms, so they can teach classes down there. And the students that are working out there giving tours or working in our collections department, cataloging artifacts or helping with exhibits, most of them, that's a living learning laboratory for them. They're looking at going into museums or history in the future, and they're learning part of what real world experience is going to be. So that's that teaching mission that we've got.